Looks like you can.
Yeah, I'm recording right now. So I'm just gonna walk you through the changes I did over the last couple days, and there's actually quite a few of them. So let me share my screen. Okay. So, so the main thing, as you know, is like now Telescope has been completely packagified. So apart from tests, right now there's no code that lives outside of the packages directory. And right now all the packages are here in the repo. And so I'm running the local versions of these packages, but ultimately the idea is people, the only thing that will be in their repo is like their customizations, right? All the rest will be downloaded from Atmosphere. So, so here's the packages file. So as you can see, now there's like only Telescope packages left, and there's two categories. So there's like the core package, which is the package that's needed to run Telescope, basically, and all the optional packages for various features that you can enable or disable at will. So what I've done is like the core package is a bit special because it depends on other packages. So lib messages, ITNM, event settings, users, comments, posts. So those are all part of the core, and there might be more in the future, or there might be less if we, for example, maybe we'll find a way to make comments optional if someone doesn't need them. So then we could take them out of the core. But right now that's how it works. So the core packages, the core package uses those packages, and it also implies them. So I don't know. So you told me you know about imply.
So yeah, so it will actually install them.
Yeah. Well, it will install them and then make them available to any package that uses the core package.
Right.
So in other words, since all these packages have core as a dependency, it means they'll all be able to access all core the stuff from these ones plus core.
Yeah.
So for example, if we look at, let's say, the pages package, you can see it's package.js file is really simple.
Yeah.
It only has
so that allows you to keep it to just that. Yeah, that's much easier to manage that.
Exactly, yeah, because the first version I had was like, like this package will use autoform and simple schema and the router, so I had all of these in there and it was a mess. So now it's so much better.
Yeah, especially every time you have to change a version, you have to update it in 15 places.
Yeah, no, it wasn't
possible.
Awful. So now, actually, all these packages, like the third-party packages, are all used by the lib package. So the lib is basically at the root of the package dependency tree, and it uses all the third-party packages required by Telescope, and it also implies those packages. So what I'm doing here is, let's say, autoform is going to be available to all the core packages that depend. Sorry, it's going to be okay. Here, what you see here is the dependencies of each core package. So the messages package depends on lib, events on lib and ITN, and so on. So since all these packages depend on lib, they'll have all of these packages available to them. And then since core depends on lib and also implies lib, like it's like transitive, so it will also make all these packages available to anything that depends on core. In essence, everywhere. So yeah, these packages, they might not be used everywhere in the Telescope app, but they are available. So I thought it's kind of a shotgun approach where, rather than like do it package by package, I just decided to make it available.
Yeah, that is way less complicated.
Yeah, because Meteor is smart enough to not like add the package code twice anyway, so it doesn't really impact performance or anything.
Yeah, that's a great improvement.
Yeah. So that's the basic architecture. Things I'd like to improve in the future. Right now, all the nav stuff, the menus, forms, it's all in core. Ideally, it would be easier to remove because in the future you might want to embed Telescope in an existing Meteor app, for example. So you wouldn't need like the navigation. Same with users, maybe. So you would need stuff like the permissions function, but you wouldn't need the user accounts or other things like that. So it would be cool to have that even more modular, where you can just remove those parts. But right now you can't. So maybe that's something for later.
Sure. Yeah, so, I'm convinced the modularity is still valuable. Every once in a while, I'm like, are we just making this more complicated than it needs to be just to get it just to say it's modular? But I'm still convinced that there's a lot of power behind having those options. I think I think I still feel like it's worth the effort. It is complicated, and it's probably even harder to explain than it is to work with. but I think it's really useful still. I think
it's actually not like, now that it's done, it's even easier to work with than before, because like you saw, every package only has one dependency, and before, like, every package I added, I had to think, okay, is it using AutoForm? Is it using IITN?
Yeah.
And now it's so much easier. So just for that alone, it's pretty good.
It's kind of almost like you're not working in a package. It's almost like having the top level dependencies. Like when you put it in the global app itself, you know that everywhere in the app it's available if you're not talking about a package. So it almost kind of has that feel again, like you're working outside of packages, except you still have control over load order, which is kind of the whole point.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. I like that.
And then, when we have the command line utility, it will be really cool to be able to install the whole thing, like, plus version like updating will be easier. So yeah, I still think it's worth it.
Yeah.
So that's for packages. So as you know, like, you've helped a lot with namespacing, so that was also a big part of my work. So all the like little helper functions are namespace, like users.can. So that will probably create a lot of bugs. Like, I fixed a lot, but there's probably a lot remaining, just because some places are still using the old non-namespaced function and it doesn't exist anymore. So we just have to test everything and go through the app.
It's going to be a big transition for anybody who's made any, made any of their own custom packages.
It is, but it's something we have to do sooner or later. So the sooner we do it.
It's definitely worth it, and if anything, it's going to be much easier to transition to, just because it makes logical sense. I mean, for example, if you're looking right at what you're looking at there, it's very intuitive when you look at it what everything there does. And I mean, ideally, it'd be to I started putting in comments wherever I could, and I tried.
I saw that. So I did that too here.
Yeah, I tried to use the same the JS doc syntax that Meteor uses, just for consistency. And I ideally it'd be great to have it on everything, and then it's kind of almost like reading documentation just by reading the code. It's
exactly. And I think we can even like automatically generate the documentation using readme.io. I think you can give it like a GitHub repo and it will extract the documentation. So
yeah, that was my whole thought with the JS doc thing. I kind of searched around a bunch, and between the fact that Meteor uses it and the fact that you can actually generate documentation from it, it seemed like a good choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. So yeah, for a lot of my new code, I've documented it using the same format.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so let's go back to the root and look at telescope lib. So it has a bunch of stuff. So one thing I did, like if you remember before, for like callbacks, you were adding to like these arrays, right? Like post, submit, callback, or whatever it was called. So they're all gone, and they're all namespaced, I guess, and they're actually so there's a much cleaner system, I think, where you have these functions. So register, remove, and run. Where so instead of just calling push, which is what happens behind the scene, you instead call the telescope callback register and then the hook and the function you want to run. And then it pushes it to the array. But the advantage of doing it this way is that if we want to change the implementation, like behind the scenes, then we can do that later on.
Yeah. Before I forget, go back to the package .js for lib there. So just so you know, the where is it? The alias.js is pretty obvious what it's doing. There's not a whole lot going on there. But for that object to have everything from that package in it, it has to be the last thing in the load order. And
makes sense.
Got added afterwards. So yeah, there's some downsides to doing it that way, but I couldn't really find, like anything that augments the telescope object afterwards has to update the alias somehow. And unless that's the last possible thing in there, like if you were to modify the telescope object outside of this package after the fact, like for example, extending it, you wouldn't have it in the T alias. You wouldn't have that extension in there. So
right. Okay. So, right. Yeah. I guess that's not.
And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not thinking of ideal design patterns here, but I couldn't really think of a better way to do that other than try to make sure it's always last. But yeah, like I said, if you extend outside of this package, which you kind of don't really want to discourage. I mean, ideally, package users could continue to extend the namespace and keep things clean. But that would So that's why for now, until we figure out a better scenario, I didn't use the T alias anywhere, just in case we decide to either scrap it or do it a different way or whatever.
I think it would probably, I would say scrap it, because I don't see a way, like, I'm extending the telescope object in these packages, and I don't see a way to declare the T alias after that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know, unless there's some other design pattern for that I didn't come across. I came across basically that exact question on Stack Overflow in a couple different places, was like, well, how do I do this if the original object changes? Is there a way to link them together? And I didn't find too many great answers. So
do you mind if I just remove it for now? Like,
yeah, no, that's fine. I didn't use it anywhere, so that would eliminate that problem.
It's not actually that bad to type out telescope, like.
Yeah, and if people really wanted to use it, they could create aliases themselves.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That feeling about it.
But even for like when you're searching across the app, like it's kind of handy to be able to search for telescope, because it's not a string that, like, if you search for T,
Yeah. I suppose you could search for T dot, but still, it's a little more ambiguous. It's probably worth having it.
Yeah, let's keep things dumb and like simple.
Yeah,
better for me.
yeah. So, it just gets easier to manage after a while.
Yeah. So anyway, so the callbacks work like this now, and like if we take a look at the submit post method. So we used to have like fairly complex code to like iterate over the array and reduce stuff, like, so this is all replaced by the callbacks.run function. so it's much cleaner.
Oh, that's nice.
It can take a parameter to run asynchronously. And and there's like the way it works now is like you you don't need, because the arrays you needed to declare them to instantiate them, I guess, and now that's just done like here when you register an array, like if it doesn't exist yet, it's added to the namespace, so it's much easier.
Yeah.
So this means that if you're adding a telescope package and you want to add a callback hook, you can do it really easily. All you need to do is like you can just create a new callback just by doing this, and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's great.
And it made the whole code much cleaner too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the fact that it kind of future proofs it too.
Yeah,
it's great to the more things you can leave open to be able to change without breaking it for other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
So I use the same pattern for modules, like template modules, like in posts, or every time you have like this list of modules, so you can register one, remove one, and then get just returns like it sorts the array for you and then returns it. So it also makes things much easier.
What's the order argument there? What is that?
So when you here are all the post modules. So
okay, yeah, it's the key pair. Yeah, the key value pair. Yeah.
So you see register using the same syntax. And I did something similar for post fields. So before we were also like pushing these field schemas to a global array. Now I've added like a function on the collection prototype. So you can do posts.register field and then pass the schema, and that will do the job. Same, so basically any collection posts, and that's another change. Before you could only like extend posts because it was the only one that was using autoform, and now comments and users are also using autoform.
Oh, great.
So you can add custom fields to comments, and you can add custom fields to user profiles. So that's pretty cool because like you could add like a city field to your profiles, or even do fancier stuff like maybe you want people to enter their API key for some service and do some integration with that. So you can allow each user to enter any custom info they want.
Yeah, that's great.
So if we're on the topic of collections, there's another new thing here, which is the editable by field.
Yeah.
So before there wasn't like a good way to manage those permissions. So if we look at the methods, so there's a step. Where is it? Oh, okay, not here. Yeah, there was a step here where there was a hard-coded list of properties that were like okay to modify by regular users, and then it checked against them. But now the list is not hard-coded anymore, and it's all stored in the schema. So here through these properties. So this basically lists which roles have the right to edit this property. And then whenever you submit the post, it will go through the schema and match the properties to the current user's role. So using this thing right here, users can submit field. And that's also used when it's time to display the form, to know which fields to show.
Yeah.
This uses this get editable fields method on the schema, which also like behind the scenes checks the schema and makes sure that you only show the user fields that they actually have rights to edit.
Oh, nice.
And then finally, although this might change, I'm also using that for allow and deny. Like, I think it probably makes more sense to deny everything and just leave the methods because we have them anyway. But yeah, kind of as a proof of concept, if you wanted to keep like allow and update and remove from the browser console, you can kind of make it secure also using the same editable by property.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of a way to centralize everything in the schema and simplify all those security checks.
Yeah. What are you doing roles differently? I see the member role. Did you add the roles package?
No, basically there isn't like a strong concept of roles beyond that. But then there's just like a few functions to check if a user is admin, is owner. Because we basically have two. I guess one role, you're like an admin or you're not an admin.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not an admin, you're a member. So it didn't warrant like using the roles package, I think.
Yeah.
But I guess the concept of roles is here, so we can extend it later on.
Right. Yeah.
Like I left it pretty open-ended. Like, where is it? Like post edit, we're calling get editable fields. Right now, it only checks. It figures out the list based on whether you're an admin or not. In the future, maybe we can add moderators, or we can get more granular, and we'll just have to modify this.
Yeah. It's probably not all that necessary to go too far with a lot of roles at this point. I don't feel like I've really even heard anybody bring that up. Like admin or not is kind of the most common use case.
Yeah, I've been thinking about maybe moderators who would be able to like approve and approve posts, but not like change your site settings.
Yep.
But yeah, right now it's not a priority. So okay, collections. Yeah, so I haven't done that yet, but I might try to reuse that same system for publications, because basically here editable by controls like write access, but you could also use the same thing to control read access. So in my example, I was talking earlier about adding like a city field to user profiles. So you would want that to be published to everybody. But then if you add like an API key field that's used internally by the app, you definitely don't want that to be available to everybody.
Sure.
So we might think of a way that people, when they add that like API key field, they can specify that it's private and shouldn't be published. I'm still thinking about that. Maybe in the beginning it will be just like a Boolean, like hidden or public. But ultimately, it might be cool to say like this field should be published to everybody, just to login users, just to myself, something like that. Okay, what else? Oh, I've changed the subscriptions a little bit. I did that just yesterday. So before we had kind of a mix of template level and router level subscriptions. So yeah, router level is if we look at the users, basically, here's a good example. If I want to access the profile page of a user, it will subscribe to the single user publication. And once that's done loading, then it will set the data context here and so on. So that's the way that posts used to work. But like a couple months ago, I introduced template level subscriptions for a couple in a couple places, and now I switched posts to them completely. So there's no more weight on in any post list controllers, and all the data does here is like figure out the terms from the URL. So the view, the limit, the category, and the search query, and then it passes that on to the template
to make it available for the template subscription.
Yeah, so the system is a bit involved. So basically, okay, to give you like a big picture view of the whole routing thing, the big problem with Iron Router is that it's reactive. So
yeah,
this thing might run X number of times,
right?
And there is no easy way to control that. So that's why I've kind of taken out as much as I could from there. And I'm actually talking with Telker Muhun. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's like one of the contributors of a Flow router, which is a non-reactive router.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been talking about him about switching Telescope to that to simplify the routing part. So we'll have to rethink stuff like the search query, because then it won't be reactive anymore. But I think overall it will be more stable and simpler. But anyway, for now, we're still using Iron Router. So here's how it works. If I'm asking for the top view will be equal to top, then it will set the terms to view top, and then it will call the post top template, which is super simple. All it does is so actually, yeah, so okay, that's not 100% finished. But right now it's kind of hard coded this way. So it's going to call the important part is this template post list controller. And the controller is like a new concept. Remove that. And so now there's like a there's a two-stage thing. So this is kind of I guess you'd call it a view model or view controller. Forget, but this is the logic that will take your subscriptions parameters and generate this context for you. So the cursor ready has more posts, the handler for load more, and then it will package all these into a context and pass that on to the post list, which is what actually displays the markup and the list. So there's a controller that sets the context, and then there's a component that actually displays it. So it's kind of a very modular architecture. And the idea here is that if you wanted to, you could also call that component from the router. So the component doesn't care where it received its context from, as long as the context contains the correct data. And in this case, it's driven from a controller. Yes, you'd call it a template controller, but it could be driven from anything else as well.
Right. Oh,
So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a new way of thinking about subscriptions. So in the future, so right now, this controller is then driven by like a template include. Just because, so the problem I ran into is that because of the reactivity, basically every time because of the way Iron Router works, if I call the post list controller directly, the created thing here would only trigger once, and then the parameters wouldn't change, appropriately.
Right.
So by adding a new, like one more step, one more include, Iron Router calls that template, which then includes the controller. And that means when I call best, then new, and then pending, every time the controller gets re-included, and then that runs again, which is what we want.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if it doesn't run, then the template don't get the variables don't get re-initialized, and then it doesn't really realize that it's changing template, and it's a whole mess. So maybe with Flow, depending on how Flow works, maybe we can get rid of these like intermediate templates. But for now, it's kind of a cumbersome but easy to reason about way of doing that. And I've worked on that yesterday, and I've learned that you definitely don't want to get smart, because it becomes like out of hand very quickly. Like,
yeah.
Even like this is already pretty complex, and it's kind of the simplest way I've found of doing it.
Yeah, it feels long for a template created callback.
Yeah. I mean, it could be shorter if I remove all the console.log and the comments, but
yeah, it's doing quite a few things.
Yeah, and it's not 100% finished yet, so maybe I'll find a better way. But for now, that's it. So that's for post subscriptions. Let me look at my history. Maybe I'm forgetting something. So like I said, I'm using Autoform for commands and posts. I spent a lot of time on Autoform itself, because I submitted a PR, which hasn't been merged in, so I'm using kind of a custom Autoform right now. But I wanted to make it possible to split a form into field sets. So before I was doing that with a custom template, but I wanted to merge that back into Autoform core, so I can use just a standard Autoform template. And yeah, the PR hasn't been approved yet, but I'm working on it. So what else? I spent a lot of time on trying to tie in the form generation with the permissions on the schema. So I tried the 3 different methods. I namespaced a lot of stuff. So I added these new APIs for removing and adding items, like menu items or callbacks. One thing I did, kind of subtle, but it's good to make a note of that. So I'm using this syntax for callback functions. So instead of the usual var equals function, I'm using the weird function add family class, and then you declare the function syntax. And by doing that, the function will actually have a name. So I don't know if you're aware of that.
Oh, otherwise it's anonymous?
Yeah, so if you do I can do foo.name, and it will return foo. So if I pass foo to and then I do that, it will know what foo is called. Otherwise, it wouldn't know. If I do, then if I do that, and then I do, it doesn't know because it's an anonymous function.
Right, yeah.
So I'm declaring every callback function that way, because then if you want to debug that, you can go to your callbacks thing and just add console.log callback.name, and that will work.
All right.
Provided it's not anonymous.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I just ran into that. It was either last week or the week before. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, it's funny how JavaScript has these like small.
Yeah, little quirks you wouldn't expect.
Well, I prefer to call them like Easter eggs. Um, oh, another thing I did, but I'm thinking it might have been a bad idea, is so you know how before we had all these properties on the user object?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to namespace them all in a nested telescope object. So I created a migration to copy them over. And the idea is that, you know, if you in the future you add telescope to your app, you might already have your own like
Yeah.
invite count or something.
Yep.
And this way it doesn't conflict.
Yep.
The reason I'm saying it might not be a good idea is because me here, like having a nested object kind of makes your life harder. Like something I ran into is like where is it? Like when you have allow and deny. If yeah, it says here field names is an array of the top level fields in doc. So that means, you know, like you wouldn't have all these things. You would just have telescope because that's the only top level field. So you know, that's just one example when if you're using allow and deny. Although, you know, we'll probably won't be using them, but yeah, it's an example where having a nested object rather than everything on the root of the object kind of adds like one step and one thing that can break. So I've been thinking maybe we could just namespace them with like a prefix, like telescope underscore comment count, telescope underscore post count.
Yeah.
It feels really ugly, but
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
I don't know if like the niceness of the nested object is worth the added complexity. You know,
Have
it's
you
like,
have you seen anything other than the allow deny access that
well, yeah,
that's
there's also like so autoform. It's kind of okay. Um,
oh,
but it does show you the like I think autoform kind of treats the nested fields the same, so that's okay. But I mean the same except for the telescope dot. But yeah, it got me thinking maybe you'll run into more cases where that happens. And then I also had this discussion with Slava. What's the uh, 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 yeah, so I asked why it was this way, and he said it's partially due to the fact that DDP operates only on top level fields. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if that will ever affect us, but
I suppose it could be as simple as just migrating back or migrating to something else. So it's not. Of course, people could build packages around that particular that particular setup, and that would
well,
break.
I don't want to migrate. Like, if we migrate, let's just migrate once, because you know,
Yeah,
if people have 3,000 users,
sure.
it's kind of
Yeah.
so let's just decide on one or the other before we push
Yep.
this out. And I mean, I've already implemented it this way, so let's keep that way for now. But
Yeah.
maybe keep in mind that we might want to revert. Like, yeah, there's
Okay.
a few more things like the email. I wasn't quite sure where to store it, so I was talking with Splendido about that. Is admin, I feel like a lot of apps use that, so maybe we do want to use the root for that. I'm not sure about Slug. It also feels like something that other apps might use. I don't know. Just wanted to have a discussion about what should go where.
Sure.
One thing I do feel strongly about though is that like there shouldn't be more nesting. I mean, there's a little bit here, but otherwise, at one point I had this idea of, oh, let's put all the votes on like a votes object inside Telescope. But then if you want to change that, it's so much easier to just change the name of the property than like copy it from one branch of the tree to another. So yeah, that's kind of an argument against nesting. Like if you ever want to change it, the migration is a lot more involved.
Yeah.
What else? So yeah, there's I refactored a lot of APIs. Yeah, those commits are not very helpful. It's just refactoring, namespacing, refactoring. Yeah. I mean, there aren't that many new features, but just like cleaning up everything took a lot of time.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So things that I still want to do is clean up the names of templates. Like they still have underscores in them for some reason. So it would feel more meteory to use camel case for template names, I think.
Okay.
I was wondering about file names though. Like, does it feel weird to you to have camel case in file names?
It does. Yeah. I don't like capital letters in file names or URLs or anything like that because it's not typical, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I find that I get used to just about anything if I look at it often enough, but generally I don't usually like capital letters in file names.
So, because the reason I kept underscore for template names was so that the template would have the same name as the file.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. That doesn't bother me at all. I actually, depending on what I'm working on, I actually use a variety for template names. I don't usually use camel case in template names because I find it easier to read. But I use camel case obviously everywhere in JavaScript. So it doesn't really bother me. I just tend to when I have the free choice to make the decision, I tend to either do underscores or dashes. But yeah.
Okay, so it's fine with me if we decide once and for all that template names have underscores.
Yeah, I find them easier to
okay,
read real
cool.
quick, but yeah, I don't have any super strong feelings about it.
Okay, yeah. Well, so let's keep it the way it is. Like, there's a few where I started using camel case, but I'll just use underscore. Like I was just, it's just yeah. In your JavaScript code, it does look a little out of place, maybe to have underscores, but if it's like a convention and there's a reason for it, I think it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Like in the HTML, it seems perfectly fine, but as soon as you put it in JavaScript, it feels weird.
It's okay. I mean, it can be a plus sometimes because if you see something with an underscore, it's a template name.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so that's about it. There's still a lot of things like, yeah. I've played with like posts and comments, but there's also things that needs to be tested, like notifications. Probably, I'm not sure they work.
Yeah.
Emails. Yeah. So I guess my roadmap for this, first kind of get it to a stage where like major features work, and like so the last piece of the puzzle was this template level subscriptions thing, which hopefully I can finish today, and then get it out to people and try and get people just to help with the commenting, the JS docs thing.
Sure.
I think that will be really helpful. And while doing that, hopefully people can come across bugs and help fix them. And if we can get to something that works, the next step would be republishing all these packages. So it'd be nice to have like a script that can go through the whole directory and then just like increment the version and run meteor publish.
That seems completely doable.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of bash trickery.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be ready to do it by hand, but if you're good with Bash, why not?
Yeah.
And then then start testing how it works, with atmosphere packages, like without running
Right. Without
the
the
local packages, and then merge it to deval, and yeah, go from there, I guess.
Okay.
I'm kind of in this spot where I'm telling everyone their big refactor is coming, so like don't don't start using Telescope now, or don't look into the code too much. So
Yeah.
I do want to get it out soonish, so people people are not like in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So so you have the subscriptions right now. What
Subscriptions, yeah, and user accounts. Like it's not this thing is not 100% finished.
and
Well, because
is that still a custom autoform template there, or is that just
no,
autoform creating that automatically?
yeah, though there's no custom auto form template anymore, so that's like the default Bootstrap thing.
So you could probably fix those labels with a label key value thing in the schema, right?
Oh yeah, no, the label are not the problem. It's more like changing your password and your email. Like there's a bit more logic there. Like I forgot how it worked before, but like if you change your email, you have to check that it's not used by somebody else, so it's not just like an email field. So
Right.
maybe remove it from here and have a separate section to handle just that. And then if we have custom fields, we also have to display them here, because that's still hard coded. That's not generated from the schema.
Right. Yeah.
So small things like that. Um, that seems to work. Yeah, there's just a few areas where I think it's like halfway done. Like so that's the new field set thing. It basically so you can have a group on your schema. So settings has that. Yeah, there's like a group parameter, and then before generating the form, it like splits it according to the groups. So yeah, it works pretty well. There's just like one use case.
How did they get the group name uh, above the line there? How are you doing that?
So
Is it act
how do I do that? I think. Well, let me check, because that's part of the auto form code. Where is it? Components. Oh, actually, templates. Yeah, so I just capitalized the name. That's pretty simple. But the idea is like I don't think that's implemented yet, but Eric was talking about having like a default label function that you can. So this would be used for internationalization, for example. You can tell Simple Schema to just internationalize to get the label by internationalizing the name as like a default label function, and it would just run that. So yeah, but right now it just takes the name. It's not internationalized.
okay?
The autoform is like pretty complex, so
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'm waiting. There's a few things where only Eric can fix them, because I don't think there's anybody else on the planet that
Yeah.
understands them. Yeah, I think the rest kind of works as before. That seems to be working. Pages, categories. Yeah, notification seems to work. Yeah, it's kind of cool that like when things work, I'm like, oh wow, I'm surprised. But
yeah. When I went through and did all that namespacing stuff, it was like felt like it was 2 or 3 days of just trying to get it to work at all.
Yeah.
After I went through and changed everything, it was just it took quite a while to discover all of the spots that something might not have been working anymore. And search and replace gets most of it, but a lot of stuff sneaks in there. But cool.
Yeah.
A lot of great updates.
Yeah, I think it's gonna make so much more sense now. Like the APIs are so much better.
Yeah. I'll have to do the data look thing. Try transitioning over their package too, just to kind of get a better idea of what everybody's about to be in for, and see if it can try and catch any major issues before we try to put someone else through it.
Like I'll try to get at least like 3 or 4 people with serious customizations to switch before we release that publicly, and I'll probably like help them like directly myself, and maybe write a blog post pointing out the major like changes. That would be good too.
Yeah, that's great. I'll try merging this stuff in tomorrow, and
cool. And
how broken I am.
yeah, no, I'm pretty excited. I feel like it's like setting a better foundation for people to build on. So
yeah,
really
no,
cool.
and it's great. Just in general, it's great to work through this stuff just for Meteor in general, for building stuff more efficiently moving forward. I mean, I've learned a ton about building apps with lots of moving parts, largely from working on this. So it's great stuff to do for sure.
Yeah, like I don't read the code of that many other Meteor apps because I don't have the time really. But I don't know if like I feel Telescope's organization is pretty good. Like probably better than a lot.
Sure.
Apps at this point.
Yeah, there really aren't a lot of good references. I mean, there's the, like the Orion CMS there has, quite a few moving parts for an open source project, but most of them are proprietary. You don't really get to see a lot of big apps out in the open to.
And most apps are hard coded, like they're only coded for one purpose, so they don't have that modularity and like open endedness. Hard to say of Telescope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it'd be nice to even be able to use parts of, even if you maybe not even a whole package, but I guess maybe now I'm rethinking that, but you could even use like for example, like the settings package. I use variations of the way settings is implemented in all kinds of in almost everything I do, because every app needs like some kind of settings, and I implement it almost the same way every time. So you could theoretically have a lot of packages be usable anywhere. They could just become official packages. Or some variation of that, I guess, but. I'm actually kind of surprised there aren't any settings packages. It seems like a problem like every single app needs to solve, and nobody. I mean, there's like the admin dashboards and a handful of things like that for doing like CRUD operations, but that's kind of a different thing. I haven't really seen like a really good implementation of application settings with a UI to manipulate it. But
the thing is, like,
sorry, go ahead.
I feel like you have to be really careful, because what tends to happen is like people are like, oh, there should be a settings package, and they create one, but then they don't maintain it, or they don't really document it, so nobody uses it, and then somebody else comes along, oh, there should be a settings package, and so on. So like that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of careful. I haven't put out too many open source packages myself, because I feel it's more productive to have like one really good one, well-documented one that everybody uses and contributes to, than like 5 crappy ones. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that seems like kind of one of the bigger things that sets apart the packages that really end up getting a lot of users and stick around and continue to get maintained is how well they're documented and how easy they are to use. And,
Yeah.
and documentation feels like it's half of the thing sometimes. It's I mean there are lots of great packages and apps out there, and media and otherwise, but if they don't have good documentation,
Yeah.
I spend all day long reading code and documentation. Like if I have to work that hard to get basic functionality working, I'll go somewhere else and use an inferior product that writes up the documentation better. Almost always. I don't want to, but it ends up being the faster way to do it. So
yeah, for sure.
I agree. How did the mentoring thing go?
Oh, well, first let me stop the broadcast. So